meeting for Thursday the 18th of October. So just before we get going, we should have between 20 and 40 people on the call. If you haven't been on these before, the etiquette is essentially keeping your microphone and web camera off or muted during the presentation. If you do have a question, you can raise your hand or type the question into the chat window and we'll try and address it as soon as possible. If there are any issues with the audio or the slides that you're seeing, make sure you type that in as well and we'll try to fix it. Those people who are presenting today, thanks for taking the time. I know some of you are filling in for others. When it is your turn, I'll basically be quite clear that we're switching over to you. And then if you can unmute your microphone and I'll advance the slides as you go along. So everything today, the slides, the comments that you write in the chat window and the audio are recorded as part of the webinar and are available to the community to use afterwards. So we might get going given we've got a pretty full schedule. And again, just apologies if there's some construction noise in the background. So there's the agenda for today. We will start by just a reminder of where we're at with the community plan and then get into current status and engagement updates and time for questions there, which is the bulk of today's presentation. I'd just like to acknowledge that Sylvia Michael was going to be giving the presentation today, but we had to switch things around at the last minute. So I guess an update there as well as Sylvia will be taking on more of the directing responsibilities in Earth Observation Australia as we move to our implementation phase and getting funding and more people involved in what we're doing over the next year. And I'll move more into an advising role in that space. So for the next couple of webinars, you'll probably hear from Sylvia more than you'll hear from me. Okay, so just a quick reminder for those of you that are new to the call this time. What we do in Earth Observation Australia is really driven by a community-derived national plan, which we set up in 2016 and that began implementing last year. And the aim here is that we're able to improve coordination and cooperation between all the sectors that are involved in Earth observation across government, industry, science, research and education, and also defence, such that we can collect this type of data and turn it into information to support a range of activities. If we act as a coordinated body, we have a lot more strength in accessing government resources and engaging both nationally and internationally. So EOA is that sort of coordination or focus group. We're not a professional society, we're not a government policy group, we're here to provide coordination and collaboration focus as well. So where are we with implementing that community plan? So Earth Observation Australia does have a steering committee, which I've been chairing. That's something that, as I mentioned just before, Sylvia Michael will be taking over more of those duties soon. And we have a number of working groups. There's 5. Those working groups are aligned with the 5 priorities in that 10-year plan. They've done a significant amount of work over the last year. And the current stage that we're at with that 10-year plan is each of the working groups have defined a set of activities and the resources required. We know how much money is required to make things happen. So that document that you can see the first page on the right is our business plan. That was just finalised over the last month or so. That sets out how we're going to obtain the funds to implement a lot of these different activities. So over the next couple of months, you'll see an increased amount of activity from our steering committee and working group on implementing the business plan. It is about getting money in to do the tasks that we require. I'd just like to acknowledge that over the last 2 to 4 years, EOA has been set up through very substantive volunteer effort across universities, government organisations, and private industry, where people have given their time freely. Given the extent of activities that we need to go on, we can't continue like that. So we are going to be obtaining funding to support those activities and moving forward and making sure people are paid for their things properly. So there'll be more on that soon. Just a quick update on where we are in 2018. We have over 440 official members. That's people who have actually signed up, provided details and agreed to contribute what we do. We have engagement with the main industry groups, particularly in the spatial and geospatial areas, who are the main users of Earth observation data. As I mentioned before, we've got our 5 working groups going. We continue to be engaged with national coordination, whether it's through research infrastructure, development of the space agency, or research activities. A lot of these national plans and processes use the information that we've derived in our national plan. So some of those outcomes so far, along from our implementation plan and setting up EOA, is having Earth observation as a major component of the National Research Infrastructure Plan, but it's part of the Spatial 2026 agenda, and that we've played a critical role in helping the Commonwealth establish Australian Space Agency, and most importantly, having Earth observation as one of the national civil space priorities in that program as it develops over time. So we are having an impact at a national level. Those are the 5 priorities. I'm not going to go into them, but they're the ones where we've got working groups in place at the moment. And I just did want to point out and highlight some of the successes so far under connection and coordination. One of the main detailed items there was helping Australia establish a national space agency. So that's something that we've helped do and get Earth observation in there as well. Under item 4, access to Earth observation data and services. I think you're all aware of the Digital Earth Australia program. That's something that has been set up based on a lot of the rationale that was provided within our national plan as well. Just a reminder that yes, we are focused on obtaining money to move forward. This is something that we were quite blunt about at a steering committee meeting earlier in the week. If we don't get funds to continue doing this work, this isn't going to continue. It's not fair on people in the community to keep asking for volunteer activities. So yes, we are serious about doing this, and yes, we will be coming to people with serious requests for funding to keep this going, given that we know we deliver a range of sources of information and activities that are of value to everyone. So these are just a list of the activities of the steering committee. The last meeting, it was only the top 3 which were active. All 6 of those have now been activated in terms of what the steering committee and working group are doing at the moment. So we've got quite an active set of activities going. Okay, now move over to other people giving us updates on what's happening with Earth observation. I'm briefly going to talk about our engagement with the Space Agency, and then we'll move into a range of other people providing presentations, and then finish on a couple of key coordinating activities going forwards. So just in terms of the Space Agency, in future we will try and have a representative of the Space Agency talking to us about their activities in Earth observation, but for today we don't. As everyone knows, it was established officially in May. They've just passed 100 days in operation. For those of you that haven't seen it, I draw your attention to this document, which is on the Space Agency's website. The link is down there below. It's an extremely good introduction to what the agency is, the scope of its activities, and where it wants to go. The page on the, I guess your right as you're facing your screens, it lists the civil space priorities that the agency will be addressing. And as you can see, if you look down that list, the fifth one is Earth observation services. There's short-term activities and longer-term activities. So we've got provision of data and access in the first one, and that's basically online data stores, new sensors, other things like that. This is a rapidly changing area, both nationally and internationally, where we have a wide range of long-term archives and processing capabilities to use. And then in the longer term, looking at small sat constellations, improving how they operate, and we'll hear from two startup companies today about that. So, Earth observation is a key activity in there, and it does actually link into all of those other areas as well. So just one key point, just to remind people about scale and of things with the Space Agency. This is essentially the time frame in the setup document for the Space Agency, looking at next year, the next 2 years, and then the 6 years beyond that, going from $25 million up to $250 million a year. So basically going from setting up and engaging and working out key directions to starting to invest in key activities and then moving forwards with that as well. So I'd encourage people to look at the Space Agency's website and those publications to see where we're going and what opportunities are. All right. What I might do now is switch over to some of our updates. The first one is going to be Norman Mueller from Digital Earth Australia in Geoscience Australia. So Norman, if you can unmute your microphone and we can get going on this.
Afternoon or morning, everybody. Stuart, am I coming through okay?
Yes, you're coming through nice and clear. Thanks, Norman.
Lovely. Okay, I'm going to keep this pretty brief. So if you go to the next slide. So the things I'm going to cover are some products that we've just put up on National Map for everyone to have a look at and play with. I'm not going to go blow by blow through every single thing because I could be here for all the day. So I'm just going to show you where to find this stuff, and then you can jump in yourself. And then I'm going to give a brief overview of us engaging with the Prime Minister's Drought Task Force and kind of segue over into Phil's talk. I won't steal his thunder, but let's move on to the next slide. So if you go to nationalmap.gov.au, there's the address, nice and simple, and add data on the left-hand column and look under the data providers Digital Earth Australia, you should find a bunch of new things. So water observations from space, we've had that product out for some time, but it's now finally properly updating and being delivered via National Map. The things you'll find in there are the 30-year summaries, counts, and also the last layer there, the confidence, which gives you an idea of whether or not water makes sense in the terrain in the places that we're showing you. But something new that we're doing is we are providing the water observations from space feature layers on a daily basis so that you can actually go in and see what was captured on a specific date across the country. Now, because it's Landsat, that means you only get a couple of passes across the continent in a day, but at least you can have a look, and it gives you a really good idea of the things that we mask out and what we're calling wet, what we're calling dry. An interesting thing that's come out of this in the last couple of days is we've discovered that it's tripped by canola. So when canola is in full flower, it actually detects as water, which kind of surprises me, but I'm going to work out what causes that and make an update sometime in the next year. The other ones being mangroves. That's a project that Leah Limburger, Richard Lucas, and several others got together and have done a mangrove product for Australia. Barest Earth, which is a project with our minerals people here inside GA, which essentially shows for the time period covered by Landsat 8 observations what we think the barest point in the observation cycle across that time period was. So that gives you this look at a pixel composite of barest pixels possible in that time period. It's really good for minerals research. And then under that, there's a couple more: weathering intensity and the multi-scale topographic position index. Now, we didn't create those here in DEA, but we are serving them up through DEA. So this is a bit of a way that others can channel stuff through DEA for delivery onto national maps. So once again, these are minerals-based things. The multi-scale topographic position index, for instance, is very similar to the old multi-resolution valley bottom flatness, if you know that product. This is kind of a much more detailed look at a similar concept, which looks at local scales of roughness and flatness, similar areas of slope and so on. Once again, really useful for the minerals industry, but it's also good for a lot of other things. So let's just jump onto the next slide. And so here's just a quick look at where you can find the details in National Map. So the position that I've opened up here, just as a quick snapshot, is in that Digital Earth Australia data providers section, just above Geoscience Australia there. Just don't keep this in mind as it's going to be like this forever. We're probably going to refine this a bit to be a little bit easier to browse through, but right now this is where you can find it. You can see I've highlighted the water observations from space filtered summary, which we find is the easiest one to get into WAFs with. And then you can see there's mangroves there and the other ones I mentioned. And if you go into each one just at this level, it gives you a bit of a blurb, some metadata. It usually gives you access constraints, and if it's there, a publication that you can go and reference the material so that you actually know what you're looking at. So if we jump on to the next slide, the things that we're doing with the Prime Minister's Drought Task Force, so far we've simply gone and made ourselves available to them. We haven't engaged in any particular program. However, they were really keen that we're there to support. And so, for instance, here's an example of what we've suggested we could do. So we've taken the WAFS data, we've used the high frequency water observations to define water bodies, and then worked out their basically most full level, and then compared through time the percentage full based on surface area across New South Wales here, for instance. So this is at a parish level. What is the mean dam level, if that makes sense, across New South Wales, between on the left 2016 and on the right 2018. So it gives a bit of a stark look at a comparison on an annual basis of just how much water is currently or has been in the landscape over essentially an annual period. So I'll just jump on to the last slide. So our industry workshops are going ahead next week. Thanks very much to Frontier SI, Phil, doing a great job there. Looks like they're all booked out, and so with that I might take questions and segue over to Phil's talk. Any questions at all?
Cool, thanks, Norman. Just see if anyone puts their hands up for questions. We might keep going time-wise. So yeah, if you do have questions, maybe type them into the chat window, and Norman, if you could respond to it that way, that'd be good.
No problem.
Cool, thanks. All right, and we might hand over now to Phil Delaney from Frontier SI. So Phil, you there?
Yep, I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yep, nice and clear. All right, I'll just hop on.
Yeah, no worries.
And let me know when to change slides.
Thanks. Yeah, so just change straight up to the next slide. So as Norm mentioned, we're undertaking the private industry engagement on behalf of the DEA program. We've given a couple of updates of this over the last couple of meetings. So this is a slide we've presented before, which just outlines the types of activities that we're doing on our way to developing a strategy for Geoscience Australia, which really looks at the technology, communications, education and outreach kinds of activities that the DEA program can best invest in to maximise the uptake of Earth observation data across the private sector. So the last time we presented, we talked about the report that we published, the DEA First Impressions report. Since then, something that we weren't originally planning on doing, but really came up as part of the first consultation outcomes that we had, was the need for people just to see what they could already do with Digital Earth Australia. A lot of people had heard a lot about it, but hadn't necessarily understood how they could already engage with it. So we released, we ran a range of webinars, which had about, I think 250 or 300 people attend over the first series, which were a high level look at what is DEA and how can I look at data, how can I access data, and how can I start to analyze data. And then we did a more deep dive technical webinar, which explained how people could use the Jupyter notebooks that we have set up to start to really understand how they can already do real-time data analysis on the DEA platform, particularly those that are familiar working A, with Python, and B, with Amazon. So next week, we're now taking this into a national series of workshops. These are, while the webinars were completely open, the workshops are really focused to private sector companies. And over Monday of next week to the Monday of the following week, we'll be doing Brisbane, Canberra, Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth, running workshops partly focused on uncovering the key activities that we need to be doing to maximise private sector uptake, but also running some more detailed technical training sessions to get people even more familiar, but also having support resources that they can use while they're going through some worked examples to answer questions and really see how people can start to use DEA already. Over the end of this year, we'll then be consolidating that into our first view of a strategy for GA, and then next year we'll be pivoting more into running some market education activities around a lot of the key industry growth sectors to start to build up a whole lot more awareness and engagement overall for the EO community across sectors like ag and mining and things like that. So if we go to the next slide. So this outlines the dates of the workshops. They are unfortunately all sold out. However, they do have wait lists. So those that are interested in engaging, you can register on the wait list there. And if we get any cancellations, we can allocate you a ticket. We'll also use that wait list to talk to people about what's happening next and to subscribe you to the website. The next slide is just what I talked about before, which is the webinar series. So these can be accessed from frontiersi.com.au/DEA. There are 4 videos up there: the overview of Digital Earth Australia, a video showing you the kinds of things you can do in National Map, but also how to go and access the raw data, and then a high-level overview for how to start to work through some agriculture and mining examples to have a look at time series data analysis, and then a 40-odd minute deep dive into data cubes and Python and the Open Data Cube. And on the next slide, which I think is my last slide. So more information, the website is up there. You can find out about our consultation. You can subscribe for updates. You can have a look at the webinars, register for the waitlist for the workshops, but also see the reports that we have already created, access the slide deck and the help manual, facilities, and all the information from the webinars, including all the links to access all the current technical resources, as well as copies of the presentations that we've done. I have a question that's just come up about whether or not the outreach webinars were recorded. Yes, so the notebooks are available to anybody, and the webinars are all recorded and up on YouTube. The workshops won't be recorded because that's more around interactive group work and things like that, so that doesn't really lend itself to a recording. We will be releasing then some more open feedback mechanisms, something like an ideas site, similar to what we ran for the 2026 agenda consultation, as well as some broader surveys open to all inputs from government, private sector and academic.
Cool. Right. Thanks very much, Phil. And yeah, I commend people looking at the website there and the webinars. They are quite detailed, and there's an extensive set of online resources, whether people are just looking to access data. But just to highlight, I mean, Phil, this is specifically about processing and analysing data online and getting results out.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, thanks. All right. Might keep going. If there are further questions, please type them into the chat window, and Phil and Norman can try and answer those. So just moving forwards. Okay. So just in terms of international Earth observation collaborations at the moment, normally we would have a report from Jonathan Ross at Geoscience Australia, but he's overseas with a number of other people at the CEOS meetings at the moment, so we won't be having an update on that. But what we will be doing is covering some of those activities. So we're very fortunate today to have Kimberly Clayfield from CSIRO giving us an update on CSIRO's significant activities on Earth observation, which are part of the space activities. So what I'll do now is just hand over to Kimberly, and she'll be telling you about the roadmap, but specifically about CSIRO's activities in Earth observation. So Kimberly, are you right to start going through that?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you nice and clear. Thanks.
Terrific. All right. Thank you. First I just wanted to mention to everyone the CSIRO Space Roadmap. If you haven't already heard about it, this year the CSIRO Futures Advisory Group developed a preliminary national space industry roadmap and a guide to key areas of opportunity for industry growth. So the CSIRO Space Roadmap was publicly released by Minister Karen Andrews at the Australian Space Research Conference on the 24th of September, and it is available from our website now if you'd like to have a look at it. This roadmap was developed by drawing on the more than 200 submissions that were made to last year's Australian Government review of Australia's space industry capability, along with direct consultation with a range of businesses in the Australian space industry, and also with CSIRO subject matter experts. So what the roadmap does is that it introduces opportunities for growth for Australian industry in both the short and long term, and it identifies some key enabling changes in technology, business and research to help exploit these opportunities. The roadmap is not CSIRO specific, it is for the Australian industry as a whole. So the three broad opportunity themes that were identified for the Australian industry are space-derived services, which includes Earth observation, space object tracking, and space exploration and utilisation. And each of those three opportunity themes are very well aligned with the stated priority areas of the Australian Space Agency, including Earth observation services. So have a look at it if you haven't already seen it. So now I'll just talk quickly about the specific activities of the CSIRO Centre for Earth Observation. So the CCEO is our hub for our national and international Earth observation activities. It was formally established on the 1st of January this year. The director is Alex Held, and we had our public launch for that in June. The centre coordinates a range of Earth observation activities within CSIRO, and it engages Australian businesses, other government agencies and research organisations all involved in Earth observation, and it also plays a key role in our international engagement with the global Earth observation community. So following here is just a brief summary of some of our most recent activities since the last one of these meetings. First of all, most exciting for us, I think, was that Novasar 1 was successfully launched in the very early hours of Monday the 17th of September from India. The picture on the lower right there is a picture of that launch. And Novasar 1 is currently expected to be operating nominally from March of next year. So as a partner in this mission, CSIRO has purchased 10% of the operational capacity of the satellite, which provides us with exclusive rights for acquisition tasking and data downlink over Australia's exclusive economic zone. And we can also process and distribute that data in near real time over our national territory and over other designated areas of interest to us. Now, we have exclusivity over the Australian exclusive economic zone, but we can also apply to task the satellite to acquire data in other regions of the world, as long as one of the other partners in the mission doesn't already have a priority claim over that area and chooses to use it. If they have a priority claim and they don't choose to exercise it, then we can potentially acquire data there too. The way that it'll be operated will be quite similar to the other research facilities managed by CSIRO, such as our ATNF. I've only got the one slide. So the data will be available to researchers from all over Australia. It'll be available free, but you will have to submit a data request to the Centre for Earth Observation, which will then be assessed on a scientific merit and priority basis. Now, the Centre, along with several other partners, hosted an Earth Observation for Pacific workshop in Brisbane last week on Thursday and Friday. That brought together representatives from many of the Pacific Island countries, together with some of the world's leading satellite data providers and data analysts, to discuss the unique Earth observation needs of the Pacific. The event was very successful. Apparently almost 100 delegates attended, and it was a really good opportunity to learn from groups that are already working in that region, demonstrate new data sets and processing techniques, and to hear about specific successes and challenges facing the Pacific region. In other news, the Centre for Earth Observation has signed a bilateral letter of intent with New Zealand's Centre for Space Science Technology. That happened last week at the workshop on the 11th of October. And the purpose of that letter of intent is to encourage and explore opportunities for joint research activities in the field of Earth observation and identify areas of possible mutual interest and collaboration like Novasar and the Data Cube. So I'm standing in today for Alex Held. He and Jennifer Zhu, our other key centre staff member, they're currently attending the CEOS plenary in Brussels, I think, and that includes a side meeting on the Space Climate Observatory initiative proposed by CNES. CNES was actually the first international space agency which the Australian Space Agency signed a bilateral MOU with, followed by MOUs with UK and the Canadian space agencies. Alex and Jennifer will also be attending the GEO plenary and the Asia Pacific Regional Space Agency Forum in the next few weeks. So they'll be able to provide an update on the outcomes of those meetings at the next meeting. Now, some other interesting news, if you haven't already heard about it, is that we recently initiated a project to acquire our own 3U CubeSat, which we're calling CSIRO-SAT-1. And before you think that's a really boring name, the CSIRO stands for CSIRO Scientific Infrared Observing Satellite. We're doing this in partnership with Australian industry. And as the name suggests, the payload will include a shortwave infrared imaging system and onboard data processing capabilities. And our intention at this stage is to build and launch that satellite within 2 years. On the data analytics side, CSIRO is continuing its work on developing a platform and development model concept called the Earth Analytics Science Innovation Hub, or EASY. The EASY platform is an internal CSIRO Earth Observation Analytics platform which builds on the underpinning open source core architectures and the code from the Open Data Cube, and it will support CSIRO, Earth observation research and industry engagement. And if you would like to find out more about any of our activities, please do visit our new website, and that's where information and processes around accessing NovaSAR data will be available as well. Thanks.
Great. Thanks very much, Kimberly. That covered a lot. And just to go back to Kimberly's first point, I really encourage people to look at that space roadmap and the opportunities it sets out. I mean, the Space Agency is looking at us to work collaboratively across Commonwealth agencies, state agencies, and other groups to build these capabilities. And the roadmaps are really actually a slightly more focused set of directives that we can engage with. So thanks again, Kimberly. Okay, just briefly, updates on collaborative research infrastructure updates. We haven't had an update on funding rounds in terms of how we might progress the Earth observation research infrastructure activities in terms of national calibration and validation activities. So the diagram that you're looking at there is the basis of that research infrastructure proposal. Some of these activities under calibration and validation are now happening in the Digital Earth Australia program. And then the second set of activities, this experimental to operational platform side, will be going forward as part of a CRC bid, which I'll talk about in a minute. Okay, what we're going to do now is hear two short industry profiles. As we're seeing new groups come into the Earth observation space, we're using Earth Observation Australia's webinars as a way of them to explain what they're doing and also just to get access to the people who are part of Earth Observation Australia. So we've got two small companies. So I'd just like to thank Benjamin and Taufik for their time today. So what I might do now is just hand over to Benjamin. I'll just advance the slide there. So Benjamin, if you're able to come off mute for the moment, and I'll advance the slides as you basically provide the commentary over the next couple of minutes.
No worries. Can everybody hear me? This is working?
Yep, that's working nice and loud and clear.
Excellent. Okay, so sorry about that. Hello, everybody. So my name is Benjamin Koshnik, and we're from Spectral Aerospace. Our key goal here is to generate hyperspectral remote sensing satellite solutions, mostly for industry uses, but mostly just as a product. Now, we're a Canadian-Australian partnership. I've been working with my co-founder in Calgary, who's doing a lot of work over there as well, engaging with that industry. And we found that there's a problem with Earth observation at the moment, and I'm sure most of you understand the basics behind this. But if you've got a multispectral satellite in space, they're sort of limited to the application that they were designed for. They've got a small number of bands that they can detect. Usually these bands are chosen based on what the satellite was designed to do. Now this is all well and good until you realize that the satellite itself might take 5 years to develop. So if you're looking to get your data next week, you're not going to have that because your satellite will take that long to build, design, put into space, and then get ready. And you just don't have that sort of responsiveness. So if you go the other route and do a hyperspectral satellites, you do have that responsiveness because they're flexible and you can use it on any application that you need at that particular moment in time. Problem with that is that you get a lot of data back. And this is a massive hurdle for a lot of hyperspectral satellites, is getting that data down. There's a lot of really good technologies coming out that could very much increase the data transmission and solve that problem. But until then, we don't have the capability to bring down hypercubes as often as we would like. So it gets very expensive to get all the data to the ground and then to distribute that data. Next. So this is Spectral Aerospace's goal. Yep. We're trying to generate satellites that can give you the flexibility of a hyperspectral instrument, but for the price of a multispectral data set. So if you have a need that requires data tomorrow, we will have the satellite capabilities to then generate that data for you, but without charging you the massive amounts of funds and just basically having the satellite not be able to do everything because it's trying to send back this huge hypercube worth of data. So next slide. So how do we plan to do that? Well, for the most part, we love talking about hypercubes, and we love talking about hyperspectral data, but most of the time you don't need it. You don't need all those bands. So our onboard processing is very simple. We throw out any bands that are not necessary, that you don't want at that particular moment in time. We can reduce the cost of obtaining that data by a factor of 100 just doing that. And that is a huge step forward. That is a huge capability increase. We're also looking into ways to compress the data further, depending on the customer's requirements. If you don't need a very good resolution, then we will compress that even further for you and use lossy compression to sacrifice resolution, reduce the cost. And this is more or less our key business model. Next. We want to remain customer focused, so we can supply the data that you need at the cost that is as low as we can make it for you. And this is more or less how we want to implement this. We want to generate access to hyperspectral data without requiring huge amounts of money and huge amounts of infrastructure that are currently needed to do it. And this is sort of where we're aiming for with this. So next slide. So we're relatively new in this, and we're still working toward getting this together. We've been sponsored by the University of Calgary Hunter Hub for Entrepreneur Thinking at the Inc. My co-founder Ryan has been doing a lot of really good work over there, trying to get a business together and interacting with the industry over there. And we've got sponsorship to go to the European Innovation Academy. There's a lot of other stuff which Ryan could probably talk about if you wanted to contact us and talk. We've also been working on our prototype and our technology. We're still relatively early days though. So yeah, that's us. That's Spectral Aerospace. If you're at all interested, feel free to reach out to us. And we're happy to talk. We're happy to discuss what everybody's doing. And yeah, thank you very much.
Right. Thanks very much for taking the time to prepare that and present it, Ben. I guess given we're a little bit time constrained, now if people do have questions, type them into the chat window and Ben can respond to them during the next presentation. All right. So what we'll do now is just if we advance to Spiral Blue and hear from Taufik. So are you online, Taufik, if I can advance the slide?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. All right.
Okay.
Right.
Yep. Cool. Yes, okay, that's loaded now. Okay, so I won't ask you to, I'll tell you when to play the video.
Okay, cool.
So my name is Taufik and I'm from Spiral Blue. And at Spiral Blue, we are solving a host of problems, including things like maritime piracy. We're also looking at defense and the Defense Innovation Hub as well. And what we're essentially looking to do is build a sort of high revisit rate constellation capable of providing persistence. So not just an image of an area, but a sort of time lapse or video of an area over time. Using this sort of thing, you can track a lot of behaviors that might be transient. So for defense, obviously, it's very interesting. And for piracy, it allows us to see what boats and ships are doing. So if I'll get you to play the video now. Our initial constellation that we would look to enter operations with would consist of 6 satellites in a sort of low inclination equatorial orbit. This allows us to get 45-minute revisit rates with only 6 satellites. If you consider that, Planet Labs, while they do scan the whole world, and we're not scanning the entirety of the band around the equator, they need 200 satellites to do daily. But with this orbit, we can do every 45 minutes or so. But of course, it's not as simple as that. Because these satellites will need to be taking fairly high resolution images. I'll get you to go to the next slide, please, at this point. Yep. So this is an image from Planet Labs that we've been the sort of data that we've been working on so far. And in this image, you can sort of see the larger container ships and oil carriers and that sort of thing. And you can just about barely make out the wakes of some of the smaller boats, and it's not really good enough to really be able to track the sort of applications that we'd be looking to tackle. So that's why we will need the high resolution. So we're looking for about a 65 kilogram satellite is what we're designing to at this moment. But this high resolution data means that there will be challenges in actually getting this data down. So what we're doing on that front is we are also using onboard processing but in this case using machine learning to be able to identify the points of interest on the image. So for example, on this image, suppose we're only interested in the large cargo ships, and those are the only bits that we want to send down. You know, the rest of the image is mostly just open ocean, so we don't really care about that. If we do that, that's an 80 times reduction in the amount of data that we have to send down. So that either means that we can reduce the size of our communications equipment, or we can increase the area of coverage to as much as we want. So that's essentially what we're doing. And next slide, please. And at this point, we are also very early stage, pre-revenue, and we're looking to apply for a few grants and accelerator programs ourselves. And myself, I'm a space engineer. My co-founder, Henry, is a machine learning scientist. We don't have that much knowledge or experience in Earth observation ourselves, so would definitely be really interested if anyone here is keen on what we're doing. Would love to hear from you and get some advice on what we're doing. And beyond that as well, Kimberly mentioned the Earth Observation for Pacific workshop. If Kimberly is still there, I would be very interested in hearing about that further, because we would have to put ground stations on the Pacific Islands for defense applications. But yeah, that's all. If you can help us in any of those ways, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks very much, Taufik. Again, just being mindful of time at the moment. If there are questions for Ben or Taufik, can you type it into the chat window? And I think Taufik, you'll be able to type into the chat window to ask Kimberly that question directly in terms of accessing what went on at the workshop last week.
Yep, sure. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. All right, we'll keep going. As a point here, we are trying to continue to engage with professional bodies, but obviously not everyone can talk when we have meetings all the time. So hopefully at upcoming meetings, we will have presentations on activities in groups like Surveying and Spatial Sciences Institute, which still has a remote sensing and photogrammetry component to it, and also the Spatial Industry Business Association as well, so that we can talk about private industry as well, but it's not happening this week. I did want to close out this section by just mentioning an activity which is ongoing. Some of you are aware that we're in the 20th round of CRC proposals. So just a brief background for those of you not familiar with CRCs. It's the government's Cooperative Research Centre program. This has been in operation for over 20 years now. Basically funds large-scale collaboration between industry, research institutes and governments, primarily for building commercial solutions and industry. In July this year, there was an application round, I think, where there were over 40 applicants or bids put in. Out of that round, they selected 6. The SmartSat CRC, which is being led by Professor Andy Coronius out of the University of South Australia, was selected as one of those essentially pre-bids to go to a full proposal. These proposals are due in at the end of November. This particular CRC is of interest to us as a community, as it has 3 programs The third program is on Earth observation analytics. So far, this particular CRC has just over $40 million of cash co-investment committed, which means they can ask roughly for the same amount out of the Commonwealth. So what we're looking at the moment is establishing a 7-year program or a 7-year activity where one of those programs will be around Earth observation analytics. So Phil Delaney from Frontier SI and myself have been engaged, particularly with setting up the Earth observation analytics component of this. We're currently in the process of contacting people to engage in the program. Frontier SI has helped deliver a range of workshops in capital cities, but we are attempting to build a commercially driven set of programs here. I did earlier on refer to the sort of research to business analytics side of the research infrastructure proposal. That's something that I'll be using to help structure the activities here in association, obviously, with some of the industries. At the moment, there are quite large industry co-investment from groups like Airbus in this space, but we also have smaller companies on board as well. So as this develops over the next couple of weeks, you'll hear probably a bit more from Phil and myself in terms of what's happening there. The other item, just to finish on today, one of the key points that came up in our webinars over the last 2 years was the need for re-establishing a national conference on remote sensing Earth observation, but not having it like a traditional sit on your butt, listen to people talk for a week conference. So with a group of people, some of whom are on the steering committee here, some of whom aren't, we've come up with essentially a symposium proposal called Advancing Earth Observation. Tentatively scheduled for September 2020. We do have significant support, both cash and in kind, potentially from the Queensland Government and the Brisbane Convention and Exhibition Centre. We've tentatively established a steering committee for the symposium, which will meet next week, and which will begin by assessing tenders from a number of groups that would host or act as professional conference coordinators. Once we have that in place, we'll come out to the community and say, this is what we're proposing, and this is the input that we would like from the community. So this is definitely going. It looks like there's significant funding behind it, and we're hoping to engage with the partners which are listed below there as well. So it will be some traditional talking, but also a lot of interactive sections, as well as coordination and collaboration and industry development. So you'll hear more about that via our email list over the next month. All right, so I'll just pause there to see if there was any other key points that people wanted to bring up in terms of other national activities before we finish the call today. And people are quite welcome to type things into the chat window or mention them as well. Dave Hudson, you got a point? You want to unmute yourself and make that point?
G'day all. I just wanted to flag that at the end of next year, Australia will be hosting Geo-Ministerial and also the Asia Pacific GEOS Symposium. So they'll both be in the first week of November in Canberra. And that's a great opportunity where people from all around the world will be coming to the Geo-Ministerial, and also people from all around the region in the Earth observation community will be coming for that meeting. So you'll probably hear a fair bit more through this channel and other channels in the next couple of months, but just thought I'd flag it.
Thanks, Dave. I mean, that is a very large-scale international meeting. So the fact that that's coming to Australia is a significant win for national coordination in that space as well. Any other points, excuse me, that people would like to make before we close off for today? Whoops. Sorry, too quick on the buttons there. Okay. All right. So if there's no other business there, and we'll just get to the next slide. Okay. Next meeting will be at the beginning of December. I'm just going to say now we're going to move that meeting because it coincides with the Space 2.0 meetings in Adelaide. So we'll revise that date. It's likely to be possibly the week before that as well. Sorry we didn't update that before. I just realised the meeting there. So if I can just encourage everyone to spend a couple of minutes on the exit survey to give us a feedback on how we're doing. And as we come to finalising the next meeting, we'll let you know the dates. So thanks again, everybody, for your time today, especially the presenters for doing that, and everybody else for sitting in. The slides and the recording of today will be available on the website over the next couple of days. And please keep an eye on the website and our emails for information about some of these upcoming national activities. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll talk to you over the email over the next month or so, and talk again at the end of November. So thanks again for taking part.